Hey everyone, welcome to Sweetcast. I found a really interesting article and I don't know that I really agree with everything here, but there's a good point. There's a good argument to be made here. So this is from The Verge, and it says what DC Comics needs to learn from Joker's success. And they're referring to the movie, the film that's almost made $1 billion, and it probably will, by the time it's done being in theaters, earn $1 billion at the box office. And at the same time, it was such a departure from what DC was doing as far as the films go. Now, how this translates to the comic books, at first to me was a head scratcher, but they did make some pretty good points here. And so here's one thing I thought was interesting. Stan Lee always used to call Marvel's strategy the illusion of change. And here in this article, they went through some really specific examples on some changes that Marvel tried to make. They would change the status quo, and readers would be very, very upset with it because they wanted the status quo. They didn't want things to change all that much. And so they make a little bit of a change, and then they reestablish the status quo. And I think that happens for DC Comics as well, but it doesn't happen, I don't know, maybe as much. There is kind of inherent freedom when it comes to DC characters. I had read once about Image Comics that their goal was really when they were doing well, sort of, a few years ago. Their goal was to be the HBO of comics, and I think that they, for a while there at least, had achieved that, and they were putting out titles that had that kind of a feel to them. And if Image is the HBO of comics, I gotta wonder what DC Comics is of comics. I mean, it's just been around forever. But DC has done some very artsy kinds of books. This is when they had Vertigo. They don't have Vertigo anymore. And also, I don't know, it just seemed like there was more creative freedom when it came to the comics. And that's again, the points that were made here. Not just with the characters, but I'd also say with the creative teams. Marvel Comics, not as much, they made some creative changes, but it's always bringing it back to the status quo. And so, yeah, this is interesting because this is the same kind of thing that happened with the movie Joker. There was a lot of creative freedom allowed so that there could be a lot of creative license taken to change things and make things as interesting as they possibly could. All right, so here's another great point here. DC's films struggled. And so I'll read this here. Regardless of what you might think personally of the Justice League or Batman versus Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice, there's a loud cult following on Twitter that swears that Batman versus Superman is the great misunderstood masterpiece of our time. It's empirical truth that these films have failed. Now, I am not in the camp that either of those movies were good at all. I saw both of them, and they were incredibly forgettable to me. I know everyone says the Snyder cut or something like that. I don't know, but they just didn't do it for me, and they also just didn't do the kind of money that they really should have at the box office. And so this, they still have all this great IP, and so moving it away from trying to copy what Marvel achieved in their cinematic universe was a good move. And it's hard to argue with that. People were interested in seeing something new, a new take on the Joker. I'll be honest, I didn't think I was when I first heard about it. I was like, oh, great, here we go, another one. I've been, generally speaking, haven't been really happy with most of the DC movies, including Aquaman. A lot of people just loved Aquaman, but I just couldn't even handle it. All right, now here's an important one. I think this is a good reminder, not just for DC Comics, but for everybody. DC took bigger creative risks and offered bigger creative rewards. So it goes on. Once upon a time, DC learned it could take another route. It took the staff on a while to figure it out. But when they did, DC became the company that took bigger creative risks and offered the bigger creative rewards. Yeah, and this is true just from, what I've heard a lot from former DC creatives and also just reading online, is that they offer you different kinds of packages pay-wise. You also get more investment into new characters that you create, and the royalties are better, though Marvel will just dump basically a truckload of cash in your lap all at once. It ends up being not as much money. It's more just to impress you in the moment, which is kind of funny and pretty telling about the companies themselves. It continues. For 2 glorious decades, from roughly the mid 1980s to the mid 2000s, DC was the company that embraced actual change and evolution in its superhero universe while also providing a platform for the world's best creators to make fully auteurist comics for an increasingly adult readership. And then, this is from Sandman, I believe, right? All right, now the article goes on to talk a little bit about finding the publisher's identity and finding its niche in the market, which is really interesting. And you could say that the DC films really suffered from an identity crisis. They weren't really doing the kinds of artistically progressive, and I don't mean progressive in a political way, but trying things new and exploring the characters in different ways that we hadn't seen before. And so, with them trying to recreate that, it was really not a great idea. All right, now the next part that they get into is the point that DC Comics Joker movie, or not DC Comics, the DC Films Joker movie had an R rating. Now, historically, that's a terrible idea if you're trying to make a comic book film, because you're cutting out a teenage market, you're cutting out younger viewers from being able to go watch it. But their box office results showed the opposite results. Obviously, it's sold extremely well, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if the rumors I've been hearing are true, that they're going to be making more films based off of other villains and continue down that R-rated, more adult theme. All right, so I'm gonna round it off here, and that is, how can DC make better movies? This was a great quote that is being pulled out here. DC can become the company that gives great directors the Mission Impossible offer. And so to continue on the Mission Impossible series embraced the differences between filmmakers. It wasn't about us all subscribing to a house style. The Brian De Palma one was different than the John Woo one, which was different than the J.J. Abrams one, which was different from mine. The refreshing thing about that was they came to me and said, is there anything you've wanted to do in a spy movie? And I said, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of things I want to do in a spy movie. And they just said, well, have at it. Now, to be fair, you've got to pick the right kind of director to give that kind of power over to, and hope that they make a success. But there's definitely a great point there. If you're allowing the creators to have the creative freedom and do something that is really going to push them artistically. I mean, after all, you're talking about storytellers, and generally speaking, storytellers don't just want to fit into a house style. They do want to try something and put their mark onto a character. So why not allow them to do that in film? I don't know. So thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this content, I strongly suggest subscribing and liking this video. That really helps me out a lot. And I'll show you, in case you didn't know, I write comic books. And right now we are in the phase of getting the proofs all together with the printer. I'm trying to show you this the best I can. This is a proof of one of the covers. This is cover B. And then you can see marked where we have black metallic. This will be a foil stamp for the logo, and then the spot UV gloss that's going to be going around on different locations on the cover. Really excited for this. Cannot wait to get it into your hands. Thanks very much. The best way that you can hear about all of this stuff in my writing is to join my mailing list. It is in the description below. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time.